My garage was really cluttered and busy, and no place to move around, so to speak, with so many different things which fill our garage, right from the garbage bins. This is a state of my garage which prompted me to make the table. This is a concept of the table I had in mind, a table with enough drawer storage. So after doing some basic measurements, I went to my local hardware store, and this is an array of the different kind of lumbers you will see, which will pretty much confuse you. Softwoods, hardwoods, different kind of measurements, 2x2s, 2x4s, etc. It depends on what kind of work you are planning to do. For my application, I wanted to make a frame with 2x4s, and I could use a good plywood which will find the base of my drawers. So I bought 3/4 inch plywoods and some 2x4s by my work. I have a table measurement of about 4 feet long and about 2.5 feet wide. So my first task was to cut the 2x4s in the exact measurements using my trusty miter saw, which will form the base of my entire structure for the work table which I'm planning to, and I'll cover that with 3/4 inch plywoods all the sides, which will give a nice finished look, and also my drawers will be also made by 3/4 inch plies. So this is the overall plan I have. I'm now going to make pocket holes on both sides of this cross frame, and I'll show you a minute how it is made. So on the pocket hole jig, we need to set up the setting here for 1.5 inches, which is the actual width of this lumber. It's a 2x4, but 2x4 is actually not the actual width. 2x4 is when it is cut from the tree, but once it's milled and polished in the factory, this is actually effectively 1.5 inch. So we set that to 1.5 inch, and then we use this mechanism to clamp it, make sure the bottom is flush. And what I have done is that I have connected the shop vac to this so that we don't have any dust flying around here. So let me just turn that on. Pocket holes are a method to join two pieces of wood together by making a hole almost diagonally across the wood, so the holes are made at almost about 45 degrees sort of an angle. It gives maximum sort of a depth between two lumber, and using the various jigs available, it makes the process repeatable, it makes it consistent. And so if you are new to woodworking, and then you should consider using pocket holes as a way to join two pieces of lumber together. So now as you see, we have these pocket holes on both ends, and we will use these pocket holes and pocket screws to attach it to the next piece of lumber, and I'll show you in a bit. So the total table is going to be 4 feet long by 2.5 feet wide. So this is what one of the left hand side frames will look like. So I have put this 2x4s with a top and bottom rail, and then two of them will hold two of our drawers, which we will see later. So the next job now is to attach them. The 2x4s are pretty rough to begin with, so once I had joined the pieces of lumber together to make my frames, I sanded them down together to a nice 120 grain, so that it looks nice and smooth, and it's good to touch, and it doesn't scratch the fingers or cause any kind of prickles. Once I had made the side frames, then my task was to join those diagonal bits of the 2x4s, which will connect to the other part of my right hand side frame. Now this was a little tricky because the frames were a little long, so I had to take care to initially glue them properly and then give them the right sort of a support before I use the pocket screws to drill them down into the base frame. This was a little bit of a trial and error, but I figured out that putting the frame down on the floor and then using the lumber standing up was the most effective way, because the frame would then be held it down a little bit by gravity as well. So I then installed 3 different frames, which was my initial plan. So 3 of these frames I installed on the left hand side frame, and once I finish with this, I will attach the right side frame as well, which will provide us the basic structure for the work table. Once the vertical strips were complete, now it was time to attach my other side frame, and I attached these 2x4 little blocks on the 2 sides. As you see, I held them tight with clamps. Now this will provide a, 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 a way to hold the vertical lumbers in place. Alright, we have bulk of the frame ready and very strong. Looks good to me. Yeah. Now, let me just turn it around like this. Turn it around like this. Ta-da! It is now time to insert the bottom of the table. So I cut the 3/4 inch plywood in the right measurements, and then cut the small notches that you see on the all the 4 sides of the bottom, so that the legs of the table can go into those little notches. Where after a little bit of trials, the initial cut was a little longer. I was finally able to make the exact measurement, and the bottom now sits in beautifully like this. So now we have the bottom done, and it's pretty stable. And that's my happy dance number 2. You may see more. I secured the plywood using the trim head screws, 2-inch. I love these screws. They have a small little head, and they are used for any kind of a fine woodwork where you don't want the nail heads to be visible. Now it is time to attach the top support frames for the table. We will be installing 3 of these support frames, 2 on either sides of the table, 1 in the center, and we will also be using 1 more support which will be perpendicular to the center support, which will be used to secure our cupboards later on. Alright, as you see, we have kept a 2x4 vertical here as well. Here it's about a little bit about an inch more than the width of our dryers, which is about 18 inches. So this has been kept at 19 inches, and this will become the base for us later. You will see when we are going to put the separators for the cupboards out here. So I think this has come along pretty nice till now. Now we move on to the more complex parts of making a cupboard. Now is the time we are going to put casters onto this workbench. The workbench is already becoming a very heavy, so later on when we are going to load it with more drawers, etc., it will become pretty difficult to add casters to this wheel. And I personally like, these casters which have a little kind of a stopper there which lets you bring it down completely to the ground and then lift it up once the wheels are set up. Now the casters have been installed. There is an easy template which you can put on the leg so that you know exactly where to drill on the legs of the table. So with the 4 casters up, it's time to us to put it back on its feet. I feel happy dance number 3 is coming. Alright, you can see that I have put the second separator as well, and these are the 3 slots in which our drawers will go. So next step is to actually make those drawers and mount them onto railings before we add the top to the work. You have to make sure everything is really 90 degrees, because if we don't get this right, the drawers are not going to slide out nicely. So I have put this 90-degree clamps at both ends before I put these separators here, because these walls have to be precisely 90, otherwise the rollers, your dryers will not be smooth. So we have to take care a little extra time to measure twice, cut once, and then fasten them. All right, now on to making the dryers. As you see here, we have 3 slots here in which 3 drawers will go. So I have cut this equal sized 6 long pieces and equal size 6 short pieces. Now it's important that all these pieces are exactly the same size, so you have to measure and make sure that all is the same size. So let's now get to assembling these drawers. Again, we are going to use the pocket holes which we used earlier to assemble them.
That we've done in all the pocket holes for the dryers, and now let's glue them together and use the 1 1/4 inch screws and make a dryer. It has to be 90 degrees, so exactly 90. So let's make sure that we respect 90. Alright, this is the making of a dryer in progress. We have the 2 clamps.
Okay, we have the casings of the 3 dryers ready now, which has to go there. So now we need to put on the track. Okay, to the next step now, to put the bottom for these dryers. So you can either use this 1/4 inch plywood, cut it to be just a little bit shorter than the dimensions of the drawer. The reason being that when you pull the drawer out, you don't want to see a little bit of this bottom of the drawer peeking out. So cut a little bit short. Now you also get a 1/4 inch like hardboard, which is good enough for a bottom of the drawer. You know, you're not going to put some heavy items like dumbbells or anything, so that's fairly fine enough. But I chose to use this 1/4 inch plywood, which I am going to nail it to the bottom of the drawers with a nail gun. So with that, you know, drawers will be complete for mounting. I love these hinges. They are I mean, everlast, but essentially these are like ball bearing based hinges. Two things I liked about them. One is that you can pull the drawer almost completely outside here, as you see. So you get the full usable space of the drawers. Second is that, as you see, these are soft close. So one drawer up, two more to go before we put the top. All right, so now we have put the hinges on both the sides, and essentially in order to ensure the right spacing, we have to, I used a spacer like this on the both sides so that the hinges are equally spaced. And then similarly under the drawer I used a spacer as well. And so this is how it works. Well, now all the three hinges has been put. Opens here. We can then move on to capping the top. Now using this circular saw, I cut 3 pieces of almost square boards which will be used as the front covers for my drawers. They will cover the front, and then once I put on the handles, the drawers are ready. So with the drawers complete, now we are going to put the top of the table. I'm going to glue it down firmly, and then that is pretty much the last step. Now we're going to have a 2-inch offset on the left hand side and also on the front of the table, whereas the back of the table is going to be pretty much flush. Now the side offset of these 2 inches are for the work table, so that you can use that to clamp any things to it, to hold and tie down things together if you are doing any work project. So this is what it's going to be. So I'll kind of glue and nail it down, and on the top this is a 3/4 inch ply. I'm going to put 2 3/4 inch ply so that we have a thick top which is not going to warp or bend over time. I will also add a hardwood protective covering to finish the top of our garage table. Now, gentlemen, that is the finished garage table. Let me know if you like it.